So as Oakbay has suffered a setback with the Bank of Baroda case having lost today, the reality is that 7,000 employees' jobs are at risk. Their basic amenities and being able to take care of their families has become a real fear. Of course, you're at home and welcome to join in the conversation. You are free to give us a call. Our lines are open. Our number is 011-542-2186. It is currently flashing at the bottom of your screen and would love to have you engage us on this issue. Also joining us on this very topic is Aubrey Chabalala, Communications Workers Union General Secretary. He'll be joining us over the phone line. Advocate Joseph Ngake from Transform RSA will hopefully be joining us in the studio very soon. Ben Sentlano, President of SA National Mining Council, joining us via Skype. Sizwe Pamla, Kusato spokesperson, I understand, is currently on the phone as we speak. Mr. Pamla, very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us. I suppose as a trade union, what would stand out to you the most, I can imagine, is the loss of jobs and savings, perhaps basic amenities for 7,000 families, not just individuals, but 7,000 families. We have to say, with regards to trade unions and labor unions, the silence has been very loud. Why do you think we've seen this reaction coming from trade unions?
Well, I wouldn't really know about the silence has been very loud, considering that an affiliate of COSAT, the National Union of Mine Workers, has been very vocal. I'm not sure how loud do people want unions to shout. The fact of the matter is that we have been raising this issue, for example, as the Federation, the first time when the banks started taking this decision long before the Baroda question. So if you want to understand the context of the story, is that when the Big Four in South Africa took the decision, it was trade unions actually who were more vocal than most people. So the fact of the matter is that workers have no dog in this hunt. Banks might have their reason as to why they ended up acting in a manner that they've done. But when you are talking about a company, you are not just talking about shareholders and managers. Workers are primary stakeholders. For a country with 10 million unemployed people, it really doesn't make sense to be taking these kinds of decisions. But at the end of the day, we think that we have to revisit the power of the banks when you consider the fact that so much has gone wrong in this country with regards to the corruption of the private sector. We have been living with this kind of revelations of how the banks themselves have really been robbing the people of South Africa and how they have violated the laws of this country. Yet, right now, they are the ones who are being given the moral high ground. That is what is said about this, that the people who have not talked in this hand are the ones who are going to pay a bigger price.
So to the general employee who's out there, who's obviously very anxious and not very sure what needs to happen going on in the future now with regards to their jobs, what recourse can they take going forward? We do know that we've seen employees, picketing outside of the banks and picketing outside of any kind of help that they think that they thought they could have. Obviously, that hasn't yielded any results. What can they do going forward?
Like we keep saying as unions, to say, workers need to join unions so that they can have that collective power. Because when you work as a collective, you are able to really push back. The problem starts when the workers themselves are not united and are not acting in unison. And we've always made this very clear to say it is always said for workers to only realize when there's a crisis that unions are important, because when you do have unions, then you are able to use that collective muscle that you have, not just at a union level, but broadly when you talk about organized labor. But right now, what we would like to see happen is a situation where workers organize themselves under the leadership of unions, and they are able to pursue this issue and look at all of the available platforms for an intervention, because at the end of the day, it's not just the 8,000 workers, it's their families. In South Africa, we know that one worker supports up to 10 people. So you can do your own calculations as to how many people will be affected.
Mr. Pamla, I'll ask you to please stay on hold. We have viewers that we've invited to give us a call and to share their views with us. I understand we have a Praisewell on the phone line. Very good evening to you, Praisewell. Your contribution?
Yes, good afternoon. How are you, ma'am?
Very well, thank you.
Thanks, ma'am. I think the problem here, we need to be honest. As I'm working for the unions also, one of the unions which is affiliated to COSAT, Comrade Sizwe Pamla need to be honest in terms of that the unions in particular that didn't do enough in terms of to intervene in this matter. I just heard him that he said the unions, in particular COSATU, raised the issue. There is a difference of raising an issue and interact with the issue and try to resolve this matter. Currently, COSATU is on the 27th. We didn't see COSATU pulling up their stance, working hand in hand with NUM, putting a lot of pressure in whatever it can be, a particular form of a march or any sort to pressurize this bank institute. They were nowhere to be found. And it's very disturbing today to hear him saying that the workers must organize themselves. It's part of the duties of the COSATU to do such and make sure that the workers are being organized, if that was the case. But be as it may, try to show that how the unions in South Africa are getting weaker and weaker each day. Because these decisions have been taken because it shows that this cartel, they don't care and they don't even worry. They can wake up and take any decision that can affect the workers of South Africa as we speak today as it's happening.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Of course, Mr. Pamla is still holding on the phone line, and we'll pose that question to him and hopefully he'll be able to respond to you. We want to go to Lindsay Marsdorp. He's also joining us on the phone line. That's the Black First Land First national spokesperson. Lindsay, thank you for joining us. You see, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers. Then this is what we're seeing with the employees from Oakbay. Of course, the other Oakbay is saying they're suffering, reputational damage. So is the bank saying the same thing. But just going forward, just the well-to-do of the employees at the end of the day is really not being taken care of. We have COSATU saying, look, we're doing all that we can. How much noise do you want us to make for you to see that, we're actually for the workers?
Look, firstly, greetings. And I think we must just deal with two first issues up front. We can't use the African proverb that says when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers, because the Gupta-run businesses are not elephants. They are ants up against an elephant, which is white monopoly capital, settler colonialism. So you must understand it in context. So when one elephant runs up and down on the grass, they trample on all black people. And then the second thing that we must correct, it's very disappointing and saddening when black people come onto media platforms like this and put the blame on workers, particularly black workers, and construct the notions that black people are just things that can be used within business and factories and somehow organize themselves just haphazardly to somehow seek protection. The problem in this country remains settler colonialism. The problem in the country remains white monopoly capital. The monopoly of banks closed the accounts of the Guptas. Now Bank of Baroda wants to do the same. And we as black people cannot understand intrinsically and cognitively that white people have rallied around against black people as a collective. They've not rallied against the Guptas. They've rallied against black people as a whole. 7,000 people, workers, in particular black people, are about to lose their jobs. And we as black people still don't fundamentally understand that we must come together. We must come together with the primary goal of taking back the land, but also in the construction of an economic sector that says white people control the economy. 97% of the economy is controlled by white people. We must take that back. That means that we must have a black-owned bank. We must have a state bank that can break down the monopoly that these banks hold over us, that make it able for us to lose 7,000 jobs. We must then, just like the Gupta family has given us a platform like ANC and defended a space like this, we must now principally say this family has been on the side of black people since they've come into this country. White people have never been on our side. We must defend the Guptas, we must defend these companies, and we principally defend all black people against white monopoly capital, against the settler colonizer, people like Johan Rupert and his running dogs of imperialism, the likes of Trevor Manuel, the likes of Pravin Gordhan, who continue to butcher and destroy black people's lives, destroy families to protect white monopoly capital.
And yet we don't see that happening. As BLF, you have been championing the issues of having a black-owned bank, and perhaps this is some of the issues when you say that, the privately owned banks seem to be a law unto themselves. But what needs to happen practically for things to actually change? As BLF, you've been pushing, should I say, rhetoric to say this needs to change, this needs to happen. But obviously, it's the black people, so to speak, that are being affected. What needs to happen?
So this evening, actually, our Central Committee is meeting and they're sitting and just studying the legal documentation to take a step on what to do forward. But it's important to also understand that we have to firstly continuously explain to our people why it is that a company can just be closed down like this, or it can just be, or suddenly their bank accounts can just be closed like this and people can lose their jobs. But we are committed to going to the streets amongst our people and rallying our people to go against these banks practically. Not only the banks, but the companies like KPMG as well, are going to take back the land from Rupert as well. So there's no other way. There's no shortcut to bring about liberation. There's no shortcut to breaking down these monopolies. We must rally, yes, political organizations and entities to push for a black-owned bank, but on the ground, we need to collect and move amongst our people to make sure that these 7,500 jobs aren't lost. We must go, and we must not allow Bank of Baroda to do this. We must not allow banks like Absa, Nedbank, FNB, Standard Bank, and so forth to rally and ensure that white monopoly capital and the monopoly of banks can continue to abuse our people.
We need to take callers. Thank you for that contribution. I'll ask you to stay online as well. Kwena from Northwest joins us over the phone line. Very good evening to you. Your contribution?
Good evening, ma'am.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I want to say it's a very, very sad day for the employees to be caught up in this fight. But I want to start by saying, Bell Pottinger, one of the big PR firms in the world, is under administration as we speak. And you know what's the reason? Hello.
Yes, Kwena, go ahead.
Yes, I'm saying one of the big PR firms in the world is under administration as we speak. And the truth of the matter is that these Guptas, they are toxic. The truth, they are toxic. They damage anything and anything they step on.
Well, thank you for that contribution, Kwena from Northwest. They're joining us over the phone line, just bringing the conversation back into studio. Advocate Joseph Ngake has just joined us in studio. He is from Transform RSA. He is the counsel. He's also a lawyer. Very good evening to you, sir. Advocate, thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
And perhaps you could pronounce to us and explain to us the nuances between, around the judgment that was pronounced today with the Bank of Baroda and the Oakbay, the issue of reputation that is at this point very suggestive. It's allegations. It hasn't been proven. Where do we draw the line between reasonable doubt and reasonable suspicion?
Look, the issue is the fact that it is an application wherein they wanted to interdict. Now, my view is that it's not all lost, and parties, especially Oakbay, will have, and related parties will have to go and look into this matter differently. Probably, among others, what they should look into is whether, on the face value, the allegations concerned are such that warrant further action on their part, because they sound more of reputational damage towards the Bank of Baroda, yet they have a responsibility as well to show that indeed there's no reputational damage. Probably they will have to look into drafting new papers directly, requesting, applying to the court to make sure that the court determine whether indeed there was a reputational damage. Under the circumstances, it was just nothing but an interdict, which interdict was intended to request the bank not to extend the period of which they're supposed to close. And it's common cause that if then the application has been refused, then the next step for them is to whether they want to pursue those aspects that has been raised against them. But under this circumstance, I don't think it's not all lost. They have to make sure that they apply to court, or alternatively look for alternative banks. But under the circumstances, I see a very serious injustice that is at play, in terms of which the right to banking seems to be not yet uhuru in South Africa. And given the fact that South Africa is a developmental state, under which it will have to be in keeping with the spirit and the tenor of what developmental state has to do. And it's very strange that under the circumstances, banks will just out of allegation can go out and close.
So essentially you say this is not over before the Oakbay. There is actually room for appeal grounds with regards to the judgment that was pronounced today.
Correct. There is room for appeal, but also they can even make sure that they apply for another bank. But for the South Africans and the right of clients to own banks, not to own banks, rather to have an account with a bank seems to be now a doom. And we don't want to see that as a country.
Yeah, let's get into the conversation, Mr. Ben Setlano, President of SA National Mining Council. Very good evening to you, sir. Thank you for joining us. Your reaction to Oakbay losing the case against Bank of Baroda and the aspersions that were cast and the ruling that seemed to lean heavily on allegations that haven't been proven?
Yeah, if I may come in there, it is true that the bank, there is a selfish interest in regards to this matter, because the judge could have looked at this matter differently, because first and foremost, when the matter such as this matter came before you as a judge, you cannot take a harsh decision like they did with this matter, because if you were listening to those employees when they plea with the bank that they are facing the festive and they've got to look for their families and so on, it means our justice system is not assisting us much in this regard, and such attempt is going to affect us badly, particularly the mine workers and their family members and so on.
Mr. Tatwana, please just hold on to your thought. I have to take a call who's been on the hold for quite a long time. Victor from Kempton Park, very good evening to you. Thank you for joining us, your contribution.
How are you, ma'am?
Very well, please go ahead.
Yeah, ma'am, just briefly, né? You know, this thing can be resolved easily. The problem in South Africa, we like to resolve our issues through the court orders. Oakbay Bank must just put their case and say that these people are closing our bank because we did 1, 2, 3. And then the bank will respond, because it will come into public. Because what we have in South Africa, they will tell you about the confidentiality between the bank and their client. Now, the bank, in terms of the law in South Africa, cannot disclose why they closed the bank. The only person who can tell us why they are closing the bank is Oakbay. So Oakbay must come in public, because once you come in public, it will force the bank to respond. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Victor, one would think the onus is on the banks to actually prove that Oakbay has been caught or is guilty of certain allegations, which hasn't happened up to now. And I suppose that's why there's all this whole big question as to why these bank accounts have been closed. Thank you for that contribution, Victor from Kempton Park. Mr. Pamla, I do hope that you're still with us. Just going back to our caller earlier, I think it was Praisewell, we had mentioned that as trade unions, there's this feeling that perhaps you don't have as much power or you have the power, but you don't seem to be using it for the benefit of your members or for the employees who so desperately need it. Case in point, the Oakbay employees.
Well, look, if you make allegations without providing evidence, I've got no reason to respond to that. Anything that can be asserted without evidence will be dismissed without any evidence. So I don't think I'm going to respond to your caller, because I've got no idea what he's talking about. The fact of the matter here is that while we are very much concerned about the issue of the workers, we are also not going to allow a situation where people want to then use what has happened to sanitize the image of the Gupta family. So that's nonsense, considering the fact that the 12th Congress of COSAT actually nominated them as the worst employers based on how they've treated workers. Currently, we are still dealing with an issue in Northwest where they treated workers they treated workers very shamefully, and those workers were subsequently dismissed at Sunset. So the issue here is about workers. Anytime you want to take it out and then you want to make it about the Gupta family and their shenanigans, we're not going to be part of that. Now, let us go back to the issue of the workers. The workers have no dog in that hand. The banks, they have a right to do things within the ambit of the law. Now, what we have to look at is, what is it that the Gupta family has done to put the workers' livelihood at stake? But also, we have to be worried that these banks have such power, especially considering that they themselves are poorly regulated. So all of these parties are at fault. It's not just the banks who are at fault. The banks in this country have taken this country for a ride for a long time. They are as guilty as the Guptas are. So the reality here is that these workers are a victim of both parties.
Yes, and as COSATU and trade unions, the question has been, what exactly have you done to alleviate the problems or to give them some kind of relief? And the answer that we have been getting from a lot of people is not quite a lot, but we'll have to leave it there, Mr. Sizwe Pamla. Thank you for that contribution. Very quickly to you, Advocate, before we go, when you're not guilty and you're being, crucified for allegations, does the law actually protect you from being crucified for that?
Indeed, the law protects everybody, and included the fact that these allegations does not suggest that they are guilty of any offense, and they can approach to court to protect their integrity. And in this case, it was not an application to protect whether there is an allegation about them in terms of how they operate, whether there is allegations of improper conduct on the part of the client, but instead it was simply to extend the contract in order for them not to remain clients of the bank. And until such time we know the facts relating to the scams that the bank resulted in the action in question, we will not be in a position to make a very fair and justifiable ground to suggest that indeed there is no reason. But the fact is... Unfortunately,
we have to leave it there, Advocate. So we've completely run out of time. The interim order is what you're about to explain, which Oakbay was seeking until December. Of course, that's one of the issues there. We'll have to leave it there. A huge thank you to all my guests who joined me this evening, and you callers at home for being a part of this conversation. Thank you very much. This is ANN7 Prime. It's time for a very short break, but just stay with us. We're back at the top of the hour with more news and updates.